So welcome to this video. What I wanted to do this time is to talk about two concepts. First of all, and I think this is where we'll spend majority of our time together, is looking at the process of hemostasis. We'll see that there's three steps to this mechanism, and then we'll briefly touch upon also on factors that impact hemostasis. We'll also very briefly touch upon some disorders as they relate to the blood. So why don't we just make a start at this time? So let's discuss the process known as hemostasis. What we're talking about here is really how bleeding stops when the said bleeding results from a break in a blood vessel. And usually this process takes around 3 to 6 minutes, so fairly quick process. This process of hemostasis involves three phases, and let's look at each of those one by one. And we're going to start with vascular spasm taking place. This is the immediate response to a blood vessel injury. And here what we're seeing is vasoconstriction causing the blood vessel to spasm. This spasm will narrow the blood vessel, which then in turn will decrease the blood loss on that site. So that was our first stage of responses. The second phase that we're going to see is our platelet plug forming. So injury to the lining of a blood vessel exposes collagen fibers, which we can see in this figure. And platelets, which are shown in the figure as these white particles, start to adhere to these fibers. And now these platelets release chemicals that make nearby platelets sticky. And as a result, more and more platelets are attracted to the site. And a platelet plug, which is also known as a white thrombus, forms on this site. And let's look at the third and final phase of hemostasis. So now the injured tissue releases tissue factor. And as a result, a clotting cascade is triggered. And as a result of this cascade, fibrin forms this kind of a meshwork that serves as a basis for the clot to form. And rather than just showing you diagrams, I also wanted to show a real microscopic picture. We can see here the fibrin clot in a hemostasis process. There are many factors at play that will either promote or inhibit these blood clotting pathways. And I want us to look at two clinically significant instances. And the first one of these that I want to discuss is the undesirable clot formation. And here what happens is that a clot that is known as thrombus forms. If it forms in certain areas such as the lungs, it can actually end up being deadly. And then I wanted to talk about when it becomes even more of a danger is if this thrombus starts to travel free in the bloodstream. And now it's called embolus. And the danger is that this clogs smaller vessels somewhere that is a critical area, like let's say brain. And now the tissue supplied downstream from this clog would be unable to receive oxygen and nutrients. And obviously the consequences of that would not be desirable. So that was our first kind of a broader group of disorders. The second group of conditions that we'll see is bleeding disorders. And here what happens in thrombocytopenia, there is an insufficient number of circulating platelets. This arises from conditions that suppress the bone marrow. And now even normal movements can cause bleeding from small blood vessels, which would need platelets for clotting. And hemophilia, where normal clotting factors are altogether missing. This is a genetic, so inherited disorder. And here even a minor tissue damage that would normally heal with no problem, like let's say a paper cut, that can cause a life-threatening, prolonged bleeding. So those were our two groups of disorders that I wanted to mention at this point. I want to also really quickly visit one more example. Here we've already seen food disorders. I want to highlight leukemia, which is our abnormal white blood cells. Even though there might be many of white blood cells, they're not normal, they're not functioning normally. And this is most common amongst very young or very old patients. And older adults are also at risk for anemia and clotting disorders. And I think that that nicely rounds up what I wanted to cover in this video. As always, I look forward to seeing you in subsequent sessions. Until then, thank you.